Hello, I am Peter Okwoche. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. 50 years on since the end of the Biafra War, we hear from those who remember one of Africa's most brutal post-independence conflicts and examine the shadow it still casts. 30 dead and more than 50 injured following a bus crash in Ghana. We report from the scene.
This is the exact spot where the accident occurred. Much of the wreckage of the two buses has been cleared from the road.
One of the world's most dangerous waterways, a 50% rise in sailor kidnappings is reported off the coast of West Africa. Also on the program, could Ethiopia be heading to the polls in August at the height of the rainy season? If the date's confirmed, it will be a key test for the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his program of reforms. And in sports, the Cameroon Football Federation has announced that the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations will now take place in January rather than in the summer. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Today marks 50 years since the end of one of Africa's bloodiest post-independent conflicts, the Biafra War. 3 states, all from the southeast and inhabited mainly by the Igbo ethnic group, tried to secede from Nigeria and create an independent republic. This sparked a bloody civil war which lasted almost 3 years and led to the surrender of the Biafrans. Between 1 and 3 million people are believed to have died in this war, mostly from hunger. Between 1 and 3 million people, like I said, are believed to have died from this war. In a moment, we'll be discussing the conflict in more depth. But first, how did the Biafra War affect people? Caroline Ogu was a schoolgirl when the war broke out. We recorded her speaking to her granddaughter Miracle about that time.
The Biafran people were not prepared. They had nothing. They were fighting, they have no gun. They were fighting, they have no bullet.
Grandma, what was life like for you before the war?
Life was good in the village. Some are traders, some are doing their businesses. Normal, just normal village life.
How did it change once the war started?
There was no market. There was a market, but the market will start from around 5 a.m. to 6 to 7. By 7:30, everybody has gone. No movement because of plane. If the plane are flying, what we do that time? They taught us. Immediately you hear the sound of plane, boo, take cover. Wherever you find yourself, you enter bush and lie flat on the floor, on the ground. You won't even care what is there until the whole thing is over. I lost my parents. My father joined the army and didn't come back till today. And because my mother, in fact, that was the first time I heard about stroke. She fell down. She shouted. I rushed there. She didn't walk. She didn't talk. After 1 week, my mother died. 2 of my brothers joined the army. And the day they came back home, it was really, they looked like skeletons. So to me, it wasn't good. It was, in fact, nobody used to even mention anything about war to me.
Joining me in the studio now is Dele Ogu, an author and historian who's published a book on the Biafra War. I'm also joined by Timothy Modu, whose father helped in the negotiations that brought about peace. Let me start with you, Dele. I mean, just briefly, if you could tell us what exactly led to this war and why was it so brutal?
Well, in short form, there was a series of pogroms which started in the May, 29th of May 1966, in which loads of Igbos were slaughtered, and it was followed by a further series of pogroms. The next one was 29th of July, the next one was 29th of September. So the secession move on the part of the Igbos was actually a defensive move. It was not an offensive move. They were retreating back to the eastern enclave, and then on 30th of May, they now declared Biafra.
And, you know, I mean, this was a country that was won for the first 6 years post-independence. You know, why was it so brutal? Why did they seem to hate each other so much?
Well, it was never really one, because these were ancient nations, as different as the Scots are to the English and to the Welsh. They became one politically because the British colonial authorities, in the process of constructing empire, put them in the same sack. So that's the reality. Civil war almost is a misnomer because these were different peoples.
50 years on, Timothy, I mean, I think we should be talking about progress now, but has there been progress? Have lessons been learned from that war, from that conflict?
Well, it's interesting that actually we're talking about 50 years and asking the question whether lessons have been learned. It's really a very big question for me to sort of answer, because there is no evidence on the ground that the effect of the war or the lessons that people normally learn from war has been learned. And the evidence is there. Otherwise, why would a group of people, even generations that weren't there when at the time of the war, I was a Biafran war child, so I would know. But to imagine that people who weren't born at that time begin to sort of, if you like, agitate and ask questions.
But you say that, I mean, you know, 50 years on, the country, Nigeria, has managed to remain one, or has it?
It depends on whose point of view we're looking at. The word managed, it's probably the way to classify it. But if you then go within the nations that make up Nigeria, the central question will be, how does each nation fare about the after effect of the war? If you look at the Igbos or even the Yorubas, or look at the ethnic minorities or the minority groups, and you ask yourself, what's going on now? How do they feel about it? Did they feel that the lessons have been learned from the war, or are there more unanswered questions? My view, to some extent, is that it seems to me that we haven't learned from it. Otherwise, we will not be in the situation where we are now, where every nation in Nigeria is almost now, if you like, agitating for some kind of separation.
Dele, Timothy says the country hasn't learned any lessons from this very brutal war. Well, let me just come back. I mean, you know the history leading up to this agitation for secession. Now we can see the same agitations happening again, you know, through MASSOB, through IPOB, who are now agitating for a separate country. Was it the same thing that happened back in '66?
Well, you see, 66 was all of a sudden. As I said, it was a defensive move. What's happening now, the theory was that there was supposed to be no victor, no vanquished. And there was supposed to be reconciliation and reconstruction. The reality is that the lessons have not been learnt. Those lives have all been wasted, because we're now back again, full circle, back to a new generation shouting for Biafra. And they're not alone. There are other areas, other ethnic groups within the country who are all tired of the narrative and tired of the experience of Nigeria. You see, and the main lesson has not been learned by the victors, in inverted commas, because there's a level of impunity that's taking place now like never before. I mean, just yesterday there was a Supreme Court judgment concerning one of the state's governorship elections in the Igbo land, one of the core Igbo states, Imo State, and the Supreme Court judge, or the Supreme Court now reverses the outcome of what the people thought was their vote.
Was their voice. Listen, we're really running out of time, but I need to put this question to Timothy. Timothy, very briefly, no Igbo man has been Nigerian president since 1960. Do you think if an Igbo man is elected as the president come 2023, things might change?
Well, the short answer, we will never know, because like you said, Igbo men have never been president for 50 years. It's there is a case for Nigeria as a whole and the nation's Nigeria to show sign of, if you like, welcoming into it. But I think the most important thing first is to have that conversation where all groups will have to make a kind of conscious decision.
Okay,
and
listen,
2023
gentlemen,
might be
thank
the
you very
opportunity.
much for coming.
Thank you.
I do appreciate it. Dele Ogun and Timothy Modu, thanks for your input into this very, very important story. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, more information is emerging about a collision between two buses in Ghana on Tuesday, which left more than 30 people dead. Authorities say one of the drivers was trying to overtake a vehicle when he collided with an oncoming bus. Around 40 more people are being treated in hospital. The accident, around 200 kilometers from the capital, Accra, has again focused attention on Ghana's road safety. Thomas Nadi is at the scene and sent this report.
Andy Kweku was traveling from Accra to Takoradi, but never reached his destination. He is among the injured in Tuesday's fatal accident.
The driver was speeding. He nearly knocked down a police barrier on the road when they attempted to stop. I was thrown through the window and broke my arm. There were other people lying on the road.
According to the police, one of the bus drivers was attempting to overtake a vehicle in front of him and in the process collided with an oncoming bus on the Cape Coast and Takoradi Highway in southern Ghana. Much of the wreckage of the two buses has been cleared from the road. The most recent statistics available points to a rise in fatalities on Ghana's roads, which has led to calls for specific policies to help keep people safe behind the wheels. Relatives of some of the victims from this latest crash have come here to identify the bodies of their loved ones.
Everyone who hears about this accident is sad. We never expected anything like this. It's so sad that we have lost so many people.
Ghana's National Road Safety Commission has announced plans to introduce speed limiters on some commercial vehicles to reduce fatalities on the country's roads, but that's yet to take effect. Thomas Nadi, BBC News, Cape Coast in southern Ghana.
Now, the International Maritime Bureau says the number of sailors kidnapped off the coast of West Africa surged by more than 50% last year. According to a UK-based maritime watchdog, the abductions took place in the Gulf of Guinea, a stretch of water from Senegal south to Angola. It's considered to be one of the world's most dangerous waters for piracy. The number of sailors kidnapped off West Africa rose to 121 last year, from 78 in 2018 in the Gulf of Guinea. Now, to discuss further, I'm joined by Stephen Askins, a lawyer at Tatham & Co., a London firm that specializes in maritime law. Stephen, are these numbers actually rising, or is it just the number of kidnappings that are rising?
So, in terms of attacks and in terms of successful attacks against vessels, the figures are fairly constant. I think what's happened certainly at the end of 2019 and what has been picked up by the IMB is that there were two attacks in particular which saw a step change in tactics by the pirates, where they took 40 crew members off two ships. So normally we'd see 4, 5, perhaps 9 crew members, but to take 20 people, 21 people off a laden tanker, leaving 1 or 2 crew members behind, is a real change in tactics. But that has thrown the figures.
But why are they changing tactic now? Because before, they would be more concerned with the oil than with the sailors.
No, I think we haven't really seen what we call extended duration robberies of oil, probably since 2011, although there were a couple this time last year. Kidnapping crew has always been good money, and I think that the step change in numbers is purely driven by greed. If it takes you 3 trips to go and get 15 people, and the cost and the risk, actually if you go out and get 20 people in one go, it becomes you have more commodity to trade.
And what about the fact that they now seem to be traveling further and further into open waters? I mean, some people say they're going over 100 nautical miles.
There's always been this ability to go out 150, 200 miles, and there's probably 3 areas of concern. One is off Cotonou, One is south of the Boni River, and then there's a group which does operate further down towards Angola, where they're probably supported by tugs or fishing vessels to give them that extra reach and capacity. But in terms of the large skiffs coming out of Boni, they've got the capability of reaching 200 miles offshore.
So what can be done to stem this increase of piracy in the region?
Well, I think for all of us who lived through the Somali piracy phenomena, what we realise is that you have to increase the risk of being a pirate, and the solution must be ashore. So it is down to the Nigerian government, it's down to the Nigerian Navy and NAMASA to really try and work out how they can disrupt the pirates from operating out of the Niger Delta.
Okay, Stephen Askins, thank you very much. Always great to get your input into these affairs. Thanks a lot for coming in. Thank you.
My pleasure.
You're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, Mimi with the sports and details of the African stars up for nominations at the Laureus Sports Awards. I'm Peter Okwoche. The top stories this hour. Nigerians are marking 50 years since the end of the Biafra War, one of Africa's most brutal post-independence conflicts. 30 people have been killed and more than 50 have been injured following a bus crash in Ghana. Ethiopia's Electoral Commission has proposed a delay to the country's landmark general election to August. It's a move that's supported by some who think more preparation is needed, while others feel the time of year will make voting more difficult. Kalkidan Yibeltal sent this report.
The Electoral Board's proposal to hold Ethiopia's first free general election in over a decade in August is a surprise. Traditionally, they are held earlier in the year to avoid the rainy season, which lasts from June to September. And there are worries about the timing.
For the voters and also for the candidates, it's so compact. This is a question of concern. It's a very rainy season in the highlands, and there will be the flooding, and rivers will be full, etc. So it will be very difficult for logistics in the highlands of Oromia and other parts of Ethiopia. This is a matter of concern for many of us.
But others welcomed the announcement.
We can align our activities towards that schedule. So we welcomed the calendar in that regard. Second is we are a bit worried about the date of the election because it's deep into the winter here. So it's going to be, we expect heavy rain during that period. So it's going to make it difficult to reach to the polling stations, specifically in areas, in rural areas where there is less infrastructure.
The Electoral Board, headed by former opposition figure and political prisoner Birtukan Mideksa, vows to overcome the logistic and security challenge and conduct a credible election. The government also seems to recognize the challenge. But whichever date is chosen, this election will be an important test for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who came to power in 2018. This year's Nobel Peace Prize laureate is keen to go to the polls.
There might be lots of challenges, not only logistics, but also peace and security. It's better for Ethiopians and for Ethiopian parties to conduct the election on time in a very peaceful and democratic manner. We better work according to constitution.
Political elites in Ethiopia seem to understand how high the stakes are with the upcoming general election. Some representatives from various opposition groups that sat down with the Electoral Board on Wednesday to discuss a proposed timetable raise a number of issues that they say could impact the general election, from the weather in August to security issues. A representative from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's Prosperity Party, however, says that the party accepts the proposed timetable. With rising tensions and conflicts, it will be a huge task for the Electoral Board to manage Ethiopia's first free and fair election in more than a decade. Alkidan Ibeltal, BBC News, Addis.
Now, the authorities in Sudan say the country is returning to normal after an uprising by members of the intelligence agency was put down by the army. The head of the Sovereign Council, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, said a coup against the revolution that toppled the former leader Omar al-Bashir would not be allowed to take place. 2 soldiers were killed during clashes to end the uprising. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi?
Thank you very much, Peter. Another calendar change for one of the biggest sports competitions in Africa. The 2021 Africa Cup of Nations will start on January the 9th after its dates were moved. Their tournament was scheduled to take place in June and July, but was changed because of unfavorable weather in the country at that time of the year. The decision was taken today after a meeting between officials of the Confederation of African Football and Cameroonian authorities. Kylian Ngala in Yaoundé.
Well, Cameroon was supposed to organize this competition in June 2021, but after meetings between Cameroonian authorities and CAF officials, the decision has been made that Cameroon will host the competition from the 9th of January to the 6th of February 2021. The reason is that there will be bad weather in June, and therefore it's not propitious, it's not good enough to organize an event of that magnitude. That is why the competition has been shifted to earlier in the year when it is quite sunny.
A detailed report shall be presented to members of the Executive Committee during the next session scheduled for 6 February 2020. Consequently, for the 2021 edition, the African Cup of Nations shall be held in Cameroon from the 9th January to the 6th February 2021.
You can't recognize the country. I don't know, maybe only South Africa, Morocco, Egypt have this kind of facilities. But in Africa, I don't know. I travel many countries in our continent, but I never seen this kind of facilities.
The CAF president there speaking about the latest inspection in Cameroon and the facilities being good. Now, the Ghana Football Association has appointed Charles Sike Akono as its new national team coach to replace Kwesi Appiah. Akono is a former captain of Ghana and spent much of his playing career in Germany with stints at Fortuna Köln and Wolfsburg, among others. Most recently, he was part of Appiah's coaching staff with the Black Stars. Let's move on to some other news. The South African Football Association has withdrawn its national futsal team from the 2020 Africa Cup of Nations. It said that the decision had been made because the tournament will be held in the city of Laayoune in the disputed Western Sahara region by Morocco. Meanwhile, Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge, South Africa's men's rugby squad, as well as Liverpool's football team, who of course have a host of African stars, have been nominated for the Laureus Sports Awards. Now to cricket, and South Africa will hope to return to winning ways when they host England in a third test in Port Elizabeth on Thursday, with the format series level at 1-1 after England's 189-run win in Cape Town. South Africa's assistant coach Enoch Nkwe says spirits are high in the South African camp.
In terms of preparation, things are shaping up nicely. I mean, already today the intensity levels have improved from yesterday, and we actually went into more specific work and focus in terms of obviously some of the things that we needed to fix and find a better way of executing them, especially when it comes.
That's all the sport. Back to you, Peter.
Many thanks as always, Mimi. And don't forget that you can get in touch with me and some of the team on social media. I'm at Okwoche. But for now, from me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the Focus on Africa team, that's all. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.